Hey all, welcome to Share Track. This is Raj here, and welcome to the second episode of the Cancer mini series. Today I'm going to start talking about a therapy called CAR T therapy that has shown promise in treating cancer. In fact, many CAR T therapies are already approved and in the market for treating various types of cancers. Cancer is a complex disease that affects millions of people around the world. While traditional treatments such as chemotherapy and radiation therapy can be effective, they can also come with significant side effects and may not work for every patient. In recent years, a new type of cancer treatment called CAR T has emerged, offering hope to those who previously had few options. CAR T stands for chimeric antigen receptor T cell. So CAR T therapy stands for chimeric antigen receptor T cell therapy. It's a type of immunotherapy that harnesses the power of the immune system to fight cancer. The process starts by collecting T cells, a type of white blood cells from a patient's body. These T cells are then modified in a laboratory to produce special receptors called chimeric antigen receptors or CARs that can recognize and attack cancer cells. There are two main types of CAR T therapy, autologous and allogenic. And before going further, let me elaborate a little bit more on T cells. T cells are the immune cells of the body. They play a big role in defending the body from infections and diseases. And they have the capability to zero in on a particular pathogen-related antigen and kill the pathogen. So I have spoken about this in one of our mini series called for HIV, and it's in episode 1 and 2 where I have discussed about the innate and the acquired immune system of humans, in which I have spoken about macrophages, B cells, CD4 T cells, and how between them they have a circuit through which they identify pathogen, destroy the pathogen, acquire the antigen from the pathogen, and use that as a marker for any future organism in the body. If that antigen is found, then they would be able to kill it. So that's the function of the T cell. Now, in case of CAR T, what's being done is that the T cell is given extra education to identify a specific antigen that's present in the type of cancer that's in the body, because the T cell does not recognize that antigen, and therefore the cancer flourishes. But once the T cell is provided the chimeric antigen receptor, which is fine-tuned to latch on to the antigen that is uniquely found in the cancer cells, then the CD4 T cells will zero in on those cancer cells, go and latch onto the antigen and deploy what is called as cytokines to kill the cancer cell. And that's how in a very surgical manner, at a very micro level, the T cells go and attack all the cancer cells in the body wherever they may be, if they have that specific antigen. And the tricky part for creating CAR T therapy, there are a few tricky parts, but one of the main parts is that identifying a unique antigen that is present only in the cancer and not in normal cells. Because as soon as the CAR T is programmed to target that antigen, it will go and latch onto the antigen wherever it is, and it's going to kill the cells which contain the antigen. So if the antigen identified is not unique to the cancer cells, then there may be collateral damage, and some of that could be serious. So that is one of the problems. The other problem is the acquiring the T cells itself. So as we mentioned earlier, there are two main types of CAR T therapies. One is the autologous and the other is the allogenic. Autologous CAR T therapy involves taking the patient's own T cells, which are collected, modified, and then infused back into the patient's body. So what happens is the patient is prepared for this particular event where blood is drawn from the patient and the T cells are isolated. Then the T cells are worked on using CRISPR-Cas9 or other gene editing methodology, and then the T cells are given a chimeric antigen receptor, which is focused on latching itself to a particular antigen that is found only in the cancer cells. Now the patient's own T cells are put back into the body, the modified T cells are put back into the body, and because the T cells came from the patient, the body does not reject it. It doesn't get host versus graft disease or rejection of any sort. But on the other hand, the problem with autologous therapy is that it takes a long time, around 15 days approximately, everything going well, to take out the blood, extract the T cells, do the chimeric antigen programming into it, and then multiply it, do quality control, and then infuse it back into the patient. By that time, the patient's condition would have deteriorated. So it takes a lead time, and there is logistics involved, and that also makes it more expensive. And the other problem with autologous approach is that the patient's T cell is likely to be weak, and therefore when you work on those T cells and put them back in, their stamina and the ability to potency is going to be much less than if it were healthy T cells. Now let us change the topic to look at allogenic CAR T therapy. In allogenic CAR T therapy, a healthy person's T cell is collected, and then it's modified to give it the chimeric antigen receptor for the particular antigen belonging uniquely in the cancer cell, and it can be given to the patient. Now, this is available off the shelf, so there is no time lag between the requirement of the CAR T therapy, allogenic CAR T therapy, and the delivery of the allogenic CAR T therapy. So that's one of the biggest gain. The second biggest gain is that the T cells are very strong because they're coming from a healthy donor, so it has got greater capability to stay in the body. The drawback, however, is that because it's a foreign T cell, the body may reject it, so there needs to be some conditioning done in order for the body to accept these modified chimeric antigen T cells. And that conditioning makes the patient further weak, and also the conditioning works on the transfused T cells, making them a little weaker. So there are this plus and minus for both allogenic and autologous approach, but suffice to say that both approach have their merits in treating cancers. Autologous CAR T therapy has the advantage of using a patient's own immune cells, which may reduce its risk of complications such as rejection. Additionally, because the T cells are specifically engineered to target the patient's own cancer cells, they may be more effective at killing cancer cells while sparing healthy cells. However, the process of collecting and modifying the patient's T cells can be time-consuming and expensive, which may limit its accessibility. And as I mentioned, allogenic CAR T therapy, on the other hand, has the advantage of being readily available and potentially less expensive. However, because the T cells come from a donor, there is a risk of rejection or graft versus host disease, which is also called as GVHD, where the donor T cells attack the patient's healthy tissues. Additionally, because the donor T cells are not specifically engineered to target the patient's own cancer cells, there may be a higher risk of side effects or complications. Despite these limitations, CAR T therapy has shown promising results in clinical trials for certain types of cancers, including leukemia and lymphoma. In fact, the FDA has already approved CAR T therapies for certain types of blood cancers. While the therapy is still relatively new, ongoing research is exploring its potential for use in other types of cancers as well. In conclusion, CAR T therapy is a promising new approach to cancer treatment that has the potential to offer hope to patients who previously had few options. By harnessing the power of the immune system, CAR T therapy may be able to provide more targeted and effective treatment while reducing the risk of side effects. Well, there are still some risks and limitations associated with the therapy. Ongoing research is exploring its potential to transform cancer treatment as we know it. I will expand upon this with more details in the next episode. That's all for today. Bye for now.